I am the disabled guy with the disabled life. That podcast is going to be about disabled issues and other things that interest me and others from the disabled community. I did this so that people understand what we go through in life and what we do, because a lot of what we do, it is interesting. I am also going to talk a little bit about ADA and things of that nature. It's something that's very important to me and something that I learned a lot about when I did an episode. I'm going to talk more about it. Okay. This podcast, it's going to come out at 10 p.m. Saturday and Wednesday. So, at so that's when that's when I think most people listen. Most people listen at night or have the episodes there for during for the daytime. So let me stop this. Stop. Thank you, Mary, for joining me. How are you doing?
Doing fine. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about yourself, and then let's go into your book and the stories that we talked about.
Okay. About myself. Well, I'm retired. I now live in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and I have one partner and one blind cat. That's a sweetheart of a cat. So she fits perfectly with my story.
Let me say it. I have two. Okay, I had one cat that we put down because he got septic. And now we ended up with two cats plus a litter.
Oh, that sounds like a lot of cats.
Yeah, we're seeing what we're gonna do with the litter. So, as you know, I am a disabled podcaster. I do this to give people a voice, and for interesting stories like writers and things like that to come on and talk to me about their book. You told me about your family. Is that what you want to talk? Is that what you want to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely.
Go right ahead.
All right. Well, I came from a rather unusual family in that both of my parents were blind, completely blind. They both were born in 1913, 1914 with glaucoma. So their eyes were already enlarged because of the pressure building up on the optic nerve. Oh my God. And the parents knew right away that there was something wrong with their baby's eyes. So my mother and father were both born in central Indiana, and although very different circumstances. My mother was born on a farm in central Indiana, and my father was born in Muncie, Indiana, in the town, to immigrant parents. They were my grandparents. So they immigrated from Italy and were very, very Catholic, very devoted, which I think informed their decision to pursue every possible way to try to cure my dad's glaucoma. So they took him to many, many doctors. They took him even over to Italy. She took him back when they were 5 years old, or when he was 5 years old, and took him to what she considered a best doctor in Florence. And the doctor said, "I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do." And she still wouldn't give up. So she took him up to the mountains, and he met with a faith healer. And he's told me, I knew I wasn't going to have my eyes restored, but I did it just to please my mother. And so she did a lot of praying and all that in hopes of trying to get his sight back, but none of that worked. And my dad didn't care. My dad was a young kid who was happy playing with his brother and doing things that his brother did, and they were having a good life. So very different. My mother was, as I said, born on a farm, but excuse me, her parents were told by the doctor, the local country doctor, that there's nothing they could do. Don't bother spending all your money taking her to different doctors because there's nothing that they can do. So they said, okay. And they set about to help her have a pretty normal childhood, as much as normal as they could. So there are a lot of adventures that they were telling me as I was growing up. And I realized they're too good to just let those stories die. I wanted to be able to tell the world about my parents and how remarkable they were, but also some of the stories are actually pretty funny and inspiring.
Let me say this
And
here. I'm gonna say something here. I
yes,
have
go ahead.
I was I was a short time ago diagnosed with glaucoma.
Oh,
So I am now starting the adventures of glaucoma, putting drops in every night.
yes.
The interesting part is that because of my fine motor, my disability, I cannot put drops in myself.
Oh, no.
So I
Yeah.
have my mom does it for me. But it modified it. I don't want to say I'm saying it now because the door is closed. It modified my lifestyle a little bit.
Hmm.
Why it modified my lifestyle is because I have to go to sleep before, as she goes to sleep.
Oh, right.
You see, it's not something that I want to do, but I do it because you should, as I say, you should once you put those drops in, you should go to sleep.
Mm, right.
They say you don't
Right.
have to, but you should.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was life changing for you.
Yes,
It
it was.
changes
Yes.
your, yeah, yeah, that's good. It's, but on the other hand, you're lucky that there are those drops because my parents had no hope for saving their sight.
Yeah. Go ahead and continue with that story. I just wanted to put that in there. That's an
Yeah,
interesting
no,
story that I had to
well,
give you
yeah,
there.
no. Please interrupt me anytime because I tend to ramble on. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt. That's all right.
Why do you think I jumped in
Um,
there and told you the story? Because that's interesting.
okay. All right. Well, maybe it would help if you'd ask me any questions.
Y-
I don't know if you've had a chance to look at my website
No,
or,
no, I don't normally go like I don't look at I don't do that. I just come out cold
okay.
because I like to get the story from people.
Okay. Well, I can tell you the story. So, my parents had all sorts of adventures and until they got to school, and then it became frustrating for them. My mom did have enough sight left that she was able to go to a public school in the very, very small town of Lincolnville, Indiana. And it was interesting because back then in the late 19, so she would have been like 19, being in elementary school, starting out in kindergarten or first grade rather. Um, the teachers didn't know what to do with them. Anybody who had any kind of disability or was a little bit different, they had no idea how to teach them. Um, my mom had one teacher that said, "Well, sit down," and they put her in the back of the room where there's no way she could see the board. And they just said, "Well, you can't see, so here, just see if you can look at this book and entertain yourself." It was like, what kind of education is that? Very discouraging because she had a bright mind and she really wanted to learn and was very frustrated. She'd come home every day with headaches. I mean, that was part of having poor sight. She was straining all the time to be able to see. Kids would sometimes make fun of her, and it was not easy. And then I think it was the second grade that was her favorite teacher who actually took an interest in her and actually taught her to read and to write. And she was always so grateful to that teacher. But then it came to the point where she couldn't see well enough at all to be in school. So her father happened to find out about a school for the blind in Indianapolis, Indiana. And that was about, 60 miles or so away from her farm. So by the time she was 10, she uh, actually couldn't see in much of anything at all at the school, regular school. So she went to Indianapolis, and that was a boarding school. So that meant that she went there in September as a 10-year-old and didn't get back home to her farm until Thanksgiving that year.
Oh no.
Um, that's a long time for a 10-year-old to be away from home
Yeah,
and living.
let me tell you
Go ahead.
a quick story happened to me. And when I was in elementary school, I had a teacher. One teacher wouldn't teach anything, and that was frustrating.
Yes.
She would basically not teach anything. Then I had another teacher that was too strict.
Mm.
So I'm gonna say it. I was having stress from that teacher.
Big time.
I was getting sick to my stomach. I was being punished and all this, and nobody knew it was stress. All they did was medicate it by saying, "Take this stuff before lunch."
Mm.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I'm like, no, this is wrong. But I had to do it because I had no way of knowing. But
Mm.
man, I was getting sick. I was, it's terrible. Go ahead,
Right.
go ahead.
Very frustrating.
Go ahead. I was
That's
feeling.
horrible. Yeah. And my poor mother would come home with headaches and just feeling miserable, and she wasn't learning. And what a waste of time for her. My father, on the other hand, was completely blind at age 4. So when it came time for him to go to school about age 6, his parents wanted to put him in the local parochial Catholic school. And so they went to the principal, and the principal said, "Well, he's blind. We can't teach him anything." And they wouldn't let him come. However, she did make an exception for religion class, that she wanted to save his soul, and she allowed him to come for, I guess, once a week of religion class, but only under the condition that a friend would walk him home. But that's all they wanted to do. They did not want to teach him at all, even though, from some of the stories I'll tell you, he was quite bright. Um, so that was a frustrating thing for them. And then finally, they went to my dad found out about it, the School for the Blind, and he went there. But he was also older when he went because he hadn't started school on time. So, skipping on a little bit, at the School for the Blind, the sexes were totally segregated, and this was in the 1920s era. So boys were on one side, the girls were on the other. They never talked to each other. They couldn't eat together. They had separate dining rooms. They had separate dorms. They had separate
This is
playgrounds.
terrible.
They're just, yeah, I just can't imagine. But uh, at least they were able to be in class together. And my mom was moved up to the 4th grade, I think, in January, and my dad was sitting there, and somehow she was able to assign the seat right across the aisle from him. And one day she had to recite a poem. So she stood up, and she was a little scared. And, most people don't like to stand up and recite poems. And I understand that. uh, she so she did, and my dad listened to her so carefully. He memorized her words as she said them and played them over and over in his head, and realizing how much he loved the sound of her voice. And that's where I get the title for the book. It's called The Sound of Her Voice, My Blind Parent's Story.
Yeah, let me say something real quick. I am an amateur operator, as you know. I don't know if I ever
Yeah.
okay. I had to memorize the test answers.
Uh,
I have a photographic memory because I can't read well.
yeah.
So, so I just want to tell you those stories so you get to know me a little bit because I forgot to tell you those things. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so they're in school, and things have, over years, develop, and my dad falls in love with my mom, but they can't talk to each other.
Oh.
Even the only time that the sexes ever really got together was when they were in high school. They had dances for the kids 3 times a year or so. Halloween and Christmas and spring, I guess they had. But they were very carefully supervised. We certainly don't want these blind kids to fall in love, because blind people shouldn't get married. They can't take care of themselves, much less each other. And how would he ever earn a living? And, oh, God forbid that they have children. So this was the kind of social setting that they were living in, and with all the negativity.
A crazy mentality.
Yeah. It's totally, now we say, wow, how could people believe that? But, oh, yeah. When you consider that blind people have always had a hard time finding a job, when you think about a blind person, you often think of someone selling pencils on a corner, or selling candy down at the courthouse, or doing menial jobs. Excuse me.
Okay.
And my dad really wanted to marry my mother, but she said, "Nope, not going to marry you until you can prove to me that you can support me." So, 1 second, let me get some water. Sorry.
Go ahead. Let me fill. As a matter of fact, in Costa Rica, they have a version of ADA.
Mhm.
You see people working in offices. You see people working as 911 operators.
Now you do. Back then, there was not much available. So at the school, they taught the boys how to make brooms. They could make brooms and sell those. They taught music, and there's some very talented people. Even my dad was also one of those very talented people. He could play piano and violin, but as he said, well, how am I going to make a living with that? I can't make a living playing in a bar, playing a piano in a bar. And, that's not going to work. Mm-hmm. And they also taught them how to do caning chairs. Back then, a lot of chairs were caned. Excuse me.
What is caning a chair? I'm curious. If you know.
Chairs were like, that's more old fashioned, but they were sort of like straw, and it was woven. The seat was woven, and so they were taught how to weave that, like straw through to make a chair.
Oh, I've seen that.
Yeah, they're not as common today, but anyway, how do you make a living doing that? So luckily, my dad had as his mentor his older brother Charles. His older brother Charles was quite adventuresome, and he took my dad along on his ventures. That's more stories in and of itself. But when Charles decided he would go off to Notre Dame to study law, my dad said, maybe I could be a lawyer. I would like to do that. So when they graduated, my parents graduated from high school at the Indiana School for the Blind. They were the only two students from the class who went to college, and they went to Ball State Teachers College in Muncie. Back then, that's what it was called. Now it's Ball State University. But they went to classes together and walked alone. And my dad didn't even have a cane. He didn't need it. He said, I know where everything is. And he did. He knew all the curbs in Muncie. He knew all the streets. He knew which direction everything was. He knew exactly where things were. Anyway, so after 3 years, that was enough time for him to be able to go to law school. Back then, you did not have to graduate from college to go to law school. So my mom went back to the farm to live. Well, he went off to Notre Dame and later became the first blind graduate of the law school up there. And that was a lot of work. Very many challenges every single day for him to get through. But he persisted because he was in love and he really wanted to get married. She said, okay, that's great. You graduated from college, or from law school, but now will anybody hire a blind lawyer? So you have to prove that you can support me. So he went and into law practice with his older brother. And it was quite the news back then. There were a lot of articles about blind man graduating and all the stuff that my dad did. And so he did get clients and proved to my mom. And a year later, they were married.
Let me tell you a quick story on me here. I love music. Mm-hmm. And I graduated in high school in 1992. ADA wasn't what it is today.
Right.
Technology is not what it is today. So I wanted to become a radio DJ. Mm-hmm. That's what I wanted to do.
Sure.
But I couldn't do it because it's like your dad. Your dad said, why am I gonna learn how to cane a chair? But in my case, it wasn't caning a chair. Mm-hmm. In my case, it's why do I need to go to college for 4 years to sit behind a microphone and play music? You understand what I'm saying? So that precluded me because of the technology. I could have done it if I wanted to, but the technology was not there.
Right.
It was going to be super challenging. Go ahead with what you were saying. So I just wanted to tell you that one because that's an interesting thing. Mm-hmm. That technology screwed me over.
Well, it also can help people now.
Yeah.
But back then, there were no tape recorders. My dad had to take. He knew how to type in Braille. And he knew how to use a print typewriter.
Yeah.
So did my mom. So he could take his test using the print typewriter. But he had to depend on readers.
Did they?
Because there were no.
Did they actually teach print typewriters in a blind school?
Yeah.
Okay, that was a little bit of a story. I'm like, how did you learn that?
I don't know how they were taught, but I have letters from my mom that she typed, and she had fewer typos than I do when I type.
Yeah, because as you told me last week when we tried to do this, right? You told me about that, and I forgot to ask you. And I'm like, and I kept thinking about it. How did he do that?
It was incredible. I remember watching her, and if you learn, I learned touch typing in school, in high school.
Mm-hmm.
You memorize where all the letters are, and off you go.
And go ahead.
So
Go ahead with the story. I'm just interested to hear how he learned that.
yeah. So back then, of course, they relied on readers. So the state of Indiana paid for readers to read to my dad all those big, thick textbooks. And that's much slower than reading it yourself. I don't know if you have ever experienced that, but listening to someone read is slower than if I can just skim it myself. Plus, he had to memorize everything the person was saying.
As a matter of fact, I'll tell you a quick one. As a examiner of amateur radio, I personally prefer to have the test accommodated for a blind person or a low reading person than them using all their devices. Because it makes it slow. We have to sit in the room until they finish. I'll give you an example and then go back to your story. There's there's 3 tests that people take. 2 of them are 35 question tests, and one of them is a 50 test. Right? So we had a guy taking a beginning test at 35 questions. We had him taking the visually impaired person taking a 35 question test, and we had another gentleman taking a 50 question test. And the person that was reading it finished first, and we had to sit there for an extra 10-15 minutes, I believe, for the low vision person.
Yes, because it's just slower. So you can imagine with reading very thick textbooks, that would take forever and a lot of concentration.
Right now, go ahead. I just wanted to tell you that I've experienced that, but on the side of an examiner.
Yes, interesting. Well, when it came time for my dad to take the bar exam, he expected someone to read him the questions, and then he would then type out the answers.
Right.
But no, they surprised him. They said, "Well, we thought about it, sir," because he was the first blind person they'd ever tested.
Right.
And they said, they were acting like they were doing him a big favor. Well, Mario, sir, we're going to do an oral exam. And my dad about fell through the floor, because it's one thing to prepare for a written exam. It's another to prepare for oral exams. And as he said, it's okay, if I don't get the right answer and it's written down, that's one thing. But to get the wrong answer while 3 people are staring at you, that's a whole nother problem.
Yeah, it is.
So, yeah. But he took it and eventually did pass.
You said eventually. How many times did you have to take it?
Once.
Oh.
I misstated that. Eventually was getting the score, but no, he passed it right away on the first try.
I experienced that with an examiner group. When I took one of my exams, I answered the question as one license, and there was another license.
Oh.
Because they actually did something they're not supposed to do. They were grading my exam as I was doing it. I had no chance to change it. Right.
That's not fair.
No, I understand that. That's one of the things that spurred me to become an examiner.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah. You see, I have little stories that actually fit.
Yeah, they do.
You go ahead, continue. I just wanted to. I interject those because they're interesting how I deal with things.
Yeah. And then, so they were able to get married, and then more stories about living with his parents, because that first year Dad couldn't afford an apartment, but and that was hard because my mom really couldn't do anything around the house. Her mother-in-law said, no, you can't get in my kitchen. You can't cook. And then Mom says, well, I can do the laundry. And she said, oh, you can't see. How could you do the laundry? But my mother can do all kinds of things. Absolutely. So finally, she got out of the apartment and into their own apartment. And basically, she taught herself how to cook and how to clean and how to do all the laundry. And she was so happy. And it's amazing how, if you want to do something, you can learn how to do it. She was taught some basic cooking skills in school, but not allowed to practice them at home. So when she finally got her own apartment, she had a Braille recipe book, and she would read the recipes and try out new recipes all the time. And she just learned by touch how to do everything.
Let me tell you another quick one. When I bought this recorder, I had watched a YouTube video on how to take my file out of the computer, out of this recorder, and put it in my computer so I can put it in Audacity and edit it.
Mm-hmm.
I knew how to do it, but my mom said, "Oh no! I don't want to go to the Apple Store and all this." I'm like, "Oh God!" And I have to wait. And then I got COVID.
Oh no! Yeah.
I got COVID, so my friend came over quickly, and I said, I need a favor. I'm stumped because of a problem. I know how to do this, but my mom doesn't think I know.
Mm.
It's simple. Simply, I mount this on the computer. I open it and I drag it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what happens when you drag a file over to your computer, over to your desktop?
Sometimes it goes in the trash, huh?
No, it'll go on my desktop and it stays there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a simple drag and drop.
Okay.
So I just drag it and boom. I told my mom later, I already knew when you did it, but I just waited because I didn't want a conflict.
Mm-hmm.
I just said, let me wait. But, it's interesting that people don't understand the way we do things. Another quick story is when I did my first exam online, right, as a proctor, I didn't have a camera because my camera wasn't working. It was clicked wrong.
Mm.
Oh God! Hold on, just a second. Let me shut this off because it's starting to say click noises.
Voice control. Awake. Stop listening. Button.
I said the word click and the computer took it as a command, which it is.
Ah.
I forgot.
Okay.
So as I was saying, okay, I'm like, because we like to see, we like to be seen as examiners.
Mm-hmm.
Because we want people to know that we're sitting there.
Right.
So they don't do something. So I watched a video. I didn't understand it. I had to watch the video 4 times to find out where the setting was. But the story here is I was able to fix it on my own.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes that. As a disabled person, sometimes it takes that. Okay, go ahead. I just wanted to interject that because that's an interesting one how I accommodate this stuff.
Exactly. And I think part of the thing is with any kind of disability or whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
you have to be creative. Excuse me. You have to think way around problems. Like my mom figured out that she needed someone on the controls on her stove. When you turn them on, you just know that it's low, medium, high, or whatever. And she had her father-in-law come over and make little notches in the knobs so she could tell where the low was, and medium, and high. So she could then turn it on to where she wanted it.
Right.
Yeah, there's all kinds of ways that you can get around problems, but it's like it's constant. You always have something that you're thinking about.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
When I was becoming an examiner, one of my lead people asked me a question that I thought was stupid at the time, but then I figured out why he asked me. He said, "Can you sign a paper?" Right?
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Yeah, I can sign a paper." Now we do it online. Now we don't do a physical signature. But the way I handled it was, since I can't write the paperwork, right? One of my team members would write it, and I would just approve it.
Mm-hmm.
When you do a federal thing, it's not who writes it; it's who signs it.
Yeah.
So I'm doing this, and And I'll tell you this story. The guy that's now now our exam lead. He didn't know that I couldn't read when I first met him. Because he saw me running around and doing all these things. The funny story here is, we went out to dinner, right? He and I went out to dinner after work, right?
Yeah.
And I said, hey, can you read me the menu? Can you read me the menu? Because I don't know what the menu is. I'm dyslexic. He's like, I didn't know that. I'm like, that's a funny story.
Yeah.
That's a funny story I tell because it's...
You have a hidden disability. In my case, my mother did not look blind. She had her eyes removed as a child, as an adult, and then she had artificial eyes. So she had glass eyes. So a lot of times she did not look blind, and people would think that she could see. Like if we were at a restaurant and they would hand her a menu, but she wouldn't reach for it because she didn't know it was there. And then the waitress would look at me funny, and I'd say, "Oh, we only need one menu," and then I would read that to my mom. But people don't know; they can't tell. Now, my dad was the opposite. He had one very big enlarged eye that was actually, when I was a child, I thought it was pretty gross, and the other eye was nothing there except just a blank socket and a lid covering up his socket because he didn't have an eye there. So he did look different. And it was obvious that he was blind. So people took that into account too. Plus, he also had a seeing eye dog, and he was instantly recognizable everywhere. Oh, there goes Mario Peroni. He's got his dog with him. You know?
Yeah.
Everybody loved the dog. Everybody was interested in, how does the dog know where they're going? Well, the dog doesn't know where my dad wants to go. My dad tells the dog where to go.
The dog doesn't know he's going to. They say go forward, and the dog knows to go forward.
Forward, right.
Go right, and the dog knows to go right. But he also knows, the dog knows if there's a problem, he won't go that way.
That's right.
No matter what. So how did you manage as a child with two blind parents?
I didn't know we were any different until I was probably in elementary school. Excuse me, mom and dad were mom and dad.
Right.
And I didn't really, it was just natural. So some differences were in them. If I had a toy and I wanted them to see my toy, they would say, put it in my hand. So I'd put my doll in their hand, and they would touch all over the doll's head. And my dad would say, "Oh, what pretty hair she has." He would just say all kinds of stuff to make me feel good. But if we wanted to show them something, we always had to hand it to them. So that was one thing.
Right.
Another thing,
I experienced something with a friend of mine that was blind.
Oh yeah.
I was gonna let him borrow one of my handheld radios, right? And I said, "Here, I need you to see this." But as a sighted person, my brain is not, I have to hand you something.
Yeah.
So I had to hand him it and explain to him how this works.
Right.
But it took a second. Whoa! I need to give you this in your hand. Go ahead. Go ahead with that. That's interesting that I dealt with it on the other side.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah.
So I forget where I was. Let's see.
You're talking about toys and kids.
All right. So I would read the mail to my mother.
Okay.
She'd go out to the mailbox and get it, and she'd bring it back, and she would be feeling the outside of an envelope, and she'd say, "This feels like a bill." And I'd look at it and say, "Yep, Mom, that's a bill from the department store." And she'd say, "Okay, I'll put it in the box." So there was a box up in the closet that she always put important mail in. And then my dad would, in the mornings, check the box. And if there was something in it, he would take it downtown to his office where he had a secretary who helped him pay the bills. Because you think about it, as a blind person, you cannot read your own mail. You cannot write your own checks. You cannot read the newspaper. I mean, it's just got to be so frustrating on so many levels. But you have to work around that. And that's what he did and what she did. My mom did.
As a matter of fact, the phone bill that we have and the AT&T, the internet that we have is in my name.
Mhm.
I manage it, but my mom writes me the check.
Right,
She
because
writes a check
you
and
can.
sends it.
Hmm.
So, but I still manage it.
Sure, sure.
If
Like
something goes wrong, I'm the one that says, "Okay, I got to make a phone call, deal with this."
exactly.
Or she'll read me a bill and say, she'll read me the bill and she'll say, "Something is wrong with the bill." And then I'll say,
Hmm.
she'll read it and she'll say that, and I go, "Read it to me."
Yeah.
And then if there's a charge that I don't like, I'm gonna make a phone call and say, "Fix it."
Yeah. Exactly.
You see, that's why I say I don't pay for it, but I manage it.
Hmm.
Yeah, I know it's interesting because I'm gonna be honest, since I've been 17 years old, I've been dealing with public works.
Mm.
What happens, you know what public works is? The people that come and take your trash away, the big trash.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
Because my dad doesn't have patience to deal with the stuff.
Mm.
My mom speaks Spanish as a first language.
Yeah.
So who was the one that had to deal with what?
You.
Get in there and deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got in there. No, those are funny stories, and I'll tell you. So go ahead. Just
Sorry, I'm having trouble with my voice.
yeah, no, it's bad.
The the other thing that was different about us
Hmm.
is that my mother would worry about being out in public. She had to be completely well dressed because she knew that she was being judged by other people. And the same
Right.
way with us kids, we had to be clean, we had to be well behaved, we had to look good all the time out in public. I always had a change of clothes. I had school clothes, I had play clothes, and church clothes. And that was because she didn't want us going out in public looking dirty. No, around our house, that was no problem. You could be as dirty as you wanted to be. But she was always worried that, oh, Mrs. Peroni, she can't see her kids. She doesn't know how dirty they are. She can't take care of them. She's blind. And she worried that the Children's Protective Services would come and take us away.
Yeah, no,
That was a very real fear.
I can understand that. So how did she handle? What clothes did you guys wear when you were going to the store? The church clothes?
Um, Not really church clothes. More maybe. Well, I can remember wearing like shorts and stuff. So more play clothes, but they better be clean. And my mother always, before she would go out anywhere, she would change her dress. She would comb her hair. She'd put on some makeup, and then she would ask me. She said, "Is my lip?" I am so sorry. Is my lipstick on straight? And I'd say, "Yeah, Mom, it's ready." And then she said, "Well, look at my dress. Does my dress have any spots on it? It should be clean. I just got it out of the closet." And I said, I'd look at her and I'd say, "Let me turn around just let me see." Yeah, Mom, you're fine. No spots. Because I was always in a hurry. It's like, let's go. Let's get this grocery store thing over with.
Yeah.
I just want to get back home and play.
Or do whatever you want.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She was very aware that people would be watching her. And back then, too, women got more dressed up. People now are very sloppy compared to what they were like in the 60s. 50s and 60s, I can remember wearing gloves to church and, nice shoes and all dressed up kind of thing. So my mom wanted to make sure that we looked good and that she looked good. Also because she was the wife of a very prominent man. By that time, my dad had been a city judge, and he was also very busy with his various volunteer work that he did.
How was he a judge? Because people wouldn't like that if you got a blind person as a judge.
How did he manage as a blind judge?
Right. How did the people react to him? Because
they had some interesting reactions. And city judge, this was before I was born, so he saw a lot of cases like driving while under the influence, or sometimes domestic violence, or minor crimes.
Right.
And so he had a rule with his staff never to oil the witness chair. Because if somebody is telling a lie, a lot of times they move around in their chair and it makes it squeak. And he could hear that. So
Yeah.
he would then be alerted that person is most likely lying. He would also ask his bailiff and court reporter for their opinions. Tell me what that person was doing when he was saying this and this and this. Was he, what did his face look like? I mean, was he smiling? Was he, but you know what? He could hear an awful lot through the voice.
Yeah.
And I'm actually pretty good at that too. Hearing people's emotions through their voices, he's very, very good at. So, yeah, he just had a few tricks up his sleeve. And there was a story too that he had his dog with him, of course, under the bench. And word got around the jail that, well, Judge Peroni's dog tail is, if it wags, that means you're guilty. Or if it doesn't wag, then you're okay. And I was like, that's totally ridiculous. But
story happened.
People believe that.
Oh God.
It was a good story.
Did people react to the story?
Oh yeah, well there was all these rumors around the jail. People believed it.
You know,
But,
yeah. It's interesting how we live our lives.
yeah.
I know how I get around now when my parents don't want to or can't go somewhere. How did you get around as a child with your parents?
Good question. So we did a lot of walking, and then we would lived on a fairly busy street that had a bus going by. So we'd walk down to the corner and wait for the bus and just take the bus anywhere. Or I rode my bicycle everywhere. I took piano lessons, and I used to ride my bike in all kinds of weather up to my piano teacher's house, that kind of thing. We did want independence. We didn't wait for mom and dad to take us anywhere because they couldn't do it, and we didn't have a car. Now, I'm the youngest of 4 children.
Right.
And by the time I was born, my oldest sister was 10 years older than me. So by the time I got to be 6, she was 16. And boy, was that a great day. We got a car. For the first time, we could go anywhere we wanted to, go for a ride if we wanted to in that car.
Yeah.
It was a 58 Chevy, and I will always remember that. Mom and Dad loved to go for Sunday afternoon car rides.
Yeah, but that was backwards because the daughter was driving the parents around.
Right. And I was thinking when my children grew up and got their driver's license, I was like, how did my parents do this? I'm sitting there holding on, and I can see, and it makes me nervous. My kids are driving.
Yeah.
But then for my parents to not be able to see and rely their whole lives are on the line with their 16-year-old daughter. My sister never liked to drive. She said, I worried that would kill my whole family. It just made her nervous to drive.
But
she did it.
Because it's scary. Because you're like, I'm just starting to drive, and I have to drive these people around all the time.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know.
We'd go for a ride.
Yeah.
And then we'd stop and get ice cream.
No, but no, that was unusual because what I hate. Let me tell you, I use my transportation like the bus, and I hate it. Because I'll tell you what happened to me. I'll tell you a story that's current. On the 16th of the last month, I had to go to training to a secure building where there's a gate. So I give the call taker instructions. Put this on the manifest. He needs to know this, right?
Right.
Because I can call the number and get him in. But on the way back, I'm not in the car, so I'm not allowed to call. Not in the vehicle. So the guy goes up to this guy. I told him go to this gate, and he says, "How do I get in?" So you know what I immediately knew? That they didn't write the instructions. So the afternoon guy is calling my mom. Trying to call me when I'm 5 minutes late because I'm still in class dealing with training. As a courtesy, I keep the phone off. I walk in that building and the phone goes off because that's what they tell us to do.
Right. Sure.
I'm in a wheelchair. I said walk, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I walk around my house. So my mom's blowing on my phone. The driver's blowing on my phone. and I'm trying to finagle these two calls, and then finally a person from the company calls me and tells me that the guy's stuck at the gate. So I'm like, okay, give him the instructions here. She says, oh no, I can't do that because he doesn't speak English. I'm like, oh God. So finally, somebody that I know helped open the gate. But you see what stupidities we had to deal with?
Yeah.
Because some people don't do their job correctly.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I remember, I think I was telling you that I ended up having to call my county commissioner.
Oh, right.
Because I got so mad. Because I got so mad that they were telling me I can't do this. I'm going to be honest with you. I called the county commissioner. Within an hour, I had the people from the county calling me.
Good.
To say what is going on, because I had to come. I was pissed off.
Yeah, I would be too.
And I had two times I had a problem that same week. Just so you know what I'm talking about. That same week, I told him to pick me up at 5 p.m. because I had to be somewhere by 7. And that's time specific because we start testing at 7. 7:30, so I want to be there by 7. So I tell them, okay, I need to be there by 5. No, I need to be there by 7. So he says, okay, give me 6. The computer's showing me 6:30, right? I said, no. I said, I have to override that because I can't do it because of the window time. And so the dispatcher calls and changes the time to 6 instead of 5.
Yeah.
So so you understand how I found this out. I call like if it's 5 at 4:40, I'm on the phone. I'm on the phone saying, "Where's my ride?" Just to figure out, to see what's going on. And it says, and the guy goes, "Oh, I'm sorry. No. Your ride is for 6." I'm like, what the blank, right?
Yeah.
So I immediately called the county right then and say, this is no good, right? And you know what their answer? You know what their answer was? We have to talk to the driver. We'll talk to the dispatcher. Okay. And the thing is, I was mad because I'm like, you have to talk to the dispatcher. Dispatcher not supposed to do that. You see, that's a disability issue that I don't like.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. When you are dependent on other people, like my dad would be picked up sometimes to go to a meeting, and they might be running a little bit late, or they forget, or something, and there you are, you're just stuck. You can't go anywhere.
You're just stranded.
Yeah, you are stranded. Yeah, but my dad had a story of one long time ago.
Right.
He was waiting on the bus with his dog, and a man drove by and stopped and said, "Hey, Mario, would you like a ride?" And my dad says, "Well, sure." And the dog that my dad always had dogs that love to go for rides in cars. So the dog hopped in the car, and Dad was there, of course, and they went on down the road, talking away. And pretty soon, my dad says, "Say, Fred, I think you're going the wrong way on a one-way street." And Fred says, "What? Oh my God, you're right. He was so, and of course he got off the street. And afterwards, he got my dad downtown. And afterwards, the guy was so embarrassed that a blind guy told him that he was going the wrong way on a one-way street.
How did he figure it out?
Told a friend.
How did he figure it out?
He just knows. My dad knew all the streets in Muncie. He knew which direction they went. He knew where all the stoplights were.
Right.
He just knew them. And he could just feel if something was wrong.
Yeah.
So then he took the friend who was driving, told a friend who was a reporter, and that reporter thought that was such a great story, and it went on the wires, and I have clippings from all over.
Yeah, I know. It's I have another funny story that happened to me about something like this. I was supposed to. Okay, what happened was, we need, so you know the story. We need 3 people for an exam. So, one of the people that I was helping to learn, calls me in a panic, says to me, so-and-so tells me that we're not going to be able to take a test. As an examiner, I pretty well know what's going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
I figure out that they're missing an examiner, right?
Oh. Mm-hmm.
They're missing an examiner to make it a valid.
Right.
So I said, who's taking it? Give me the name. I know the person. I said, okay, give me a day, and I'll call you back. So I call my friend, the one that does the exams now. He wasn't an examiner at the time. I asked him, are you going to such and such a meeting? Right?
Mm-hmm.
He said, yes. Do you need to? He said, yes. I didn't even have to say I need to go. He asked me.
That's wonderful.
He asked me. But he says, okay, I have to be there at 10, and I have to be there at noon. So you know what that means?
You go early.
I had to go early. I couldn't help it.
Yeah.
You see, there's the things that we have. That's why I asked you about your dad and how he does things, because sometimes we don't like it, but we have to what?
Yeah, got to do it anyway. Yeah, and that's why I say they have to be creative and coming up with solutions.
Yeah,
that's a problem.
So as I was, go ahead. But as I was, I'm telling you that a lot of people, and there's another issue that I don't like. As an examiner, people recognize me.
Mm.
You know why they recognize me?
Why?
Take a guess. Like, people recognize your dad. Your dad when he was walking around with his dog. Oh, that's that person. I'm in the room, and I'm the only one in the wheelchair.
Oh, sure.
So what happens? I went to Orlando, 4 hours away for a ham thing.
Yeah.
And a person said, oh, that's the one that gave you the exam. I'm like, oh, God.
Yeah, well, because they remember you.
Yeah.
Because you're different.
Right, no, but that's what I'm saying, because a lot of that is, your stories are very interesting.
Thank you.
So, well, let me ask you this one, because this is weird. When you were in high school, how did they do the absences?
It was a fairly small school that I went to, and I assume they just kept a record, but I never skipped school, so I would be sick every once in a while. But
no, but what I mean by absence is, okay, when I was in school, they didn't tell me the right information. In middle school, we had to do what they call an admit. Are you familiar?
What?
Admit, when we were absent.
Oh, okay.
So it was a procedure where you had to take a note from your parents and take it and put it in, give it to them, and the counselor would come and sign a paper, and you would get a permissible absence. Mm-hmm. Right? But nobody told me that the difference in high school was different. A phone call had to be made, and I didn't know about it. So I assume when I bring this note in, and I do get an unpermissible absence for one time. Why? Because nobody told me about it. So it's interesting, because the reason I asked you is because what would happen? What would happen if you needed a note for school or something? Would your parent just sign it?
Yeah, good question.
How would that work?
I'm trying to remember. Most likely, I would write my own note, and then both my mom and dad had a signature pad,
right?
Where they just stamped it, and teachers and people knew that was legit. But back then we didn't think about lying or saying I wasn't devious at all. I was pretty much by the book. So
no.
I didn't take advantage of my parents' blindness.
No, I didn't either. I was like, when I was in school, when I was in middle school, people say, oh, you can skip school, but I decided not to do that by saying I was sick. Because you know what happened? If you're sick and you get sent to school because they don't believe you, imagine how frustrating that is.
Yeah.
I would never do that. I would never do that. Even if I didn't want to go to school because I was pissed off or whatever it was, I would still go.
Me too.
No, because
and so would my dad, of course.
No, because you have to. Because if you're sick, you need to be believed.
Mm-hmm.
There's times I would get up in the morning and say, "Mom, I have a cold that's terrible. right?
Yeah.
The minute I would say the cold, I don't feel good, my cold is terrible, why would they say, oh no, stay home? Because they knew, Mom knew that if I said I'm sick, it's because why?
Mm.
And one day the story was different. I ended up having to do a fashion show for Home Economics.
Okay.
I ended up in a fashion show with, I don't know how I did. Yeah, because somebody was failing and she needed a grade, right?
Yeah.
And the only place it put her, it was a pair. It was to be a pair of us.
Okay.
So I'm like, man. So I'm like, I'm sick. I'm sick. I have a cold. Dress rehearsal before the evening show. I am sick. And I told Mom, no, I have to go. I have to do this, okay? She didn't want me to go, but I said, look, I'm stuck. I'm committed, right?
Uh-huh.
So I had a, you know how you get a head cold?
Yeah.
Ugh. I had a head cold. So I had a head cold. She got me dressed in a tuxedo and then like a tuxedo.
Oh my.
And I wear this thing to school. People look at me like, what? I said, yep,
Exactly.
the fashion show. So I'm like, yeah, okay. So, but the day before that, I was sick and I wanted to go home. It was dress rehearsal. So the teacher, they have this policy that I don't like. That high schoolers cannot make a decision to take an aspirin.
Mm.
That makes no sense. You know why I say that
Right.
makes no sense? Because you go home and what do? You have a headache. What do you do?
Oh yeah. You take another aspirin.
You pop two aspirin and you go on with life. So I'm dying with a head cold and I have a terrible headache, almost a migraine. And she says, you can't go home. It's dress rehearsal before the show, right? The one
Sure.
before. I'm like, oh God. So I said, the only way I'm going to stay here is if I get an aspirin. I can't do it. So she says, okay. So she takes me back into the home ec office, right? And she says,
Yeah.
I didn't give you this.
Right. She'd be in trouble.
But she gave me two aspirin out of her purse.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying? But it's like, oh God, no. I tell you those stories because it's absurd.
A lot of what we have to do in life is crazy.
No, it's absurd because I'm like, it's like, oh, I'm gonna say this and we can go. We can stop. I also volunteer for the Red Cross.
Mm-hmm.
So I as a person, I was out with a group. We were doing what they call sub-volunteering. We're an organization that jumped into them.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a guy that was 17 years old driving a service truck and was speeding.
Oh dear.
So he gets caught. They send him home and they need a person. I am this person, right?
Oh.
So they get me and they call me. We had a hurricane, but it was not a big deal here where I live, right? But if my leadership is calling me, what does that mean?
Gotta go.
Something is wrong somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay. They call me and I said, okay, I'll go. And Mom said, no, why are you going? You don't have to go anywhere. It's not bad. I go, they're calling me. There's a problem. So they come get me. And the Red Cross people that don't know me say, oh, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. Whatever they tell me to do. My guys. So after that story, I was getting calls. They were getting calls to come to get me and take me to work for them. Because they realized that I'm going to do my job. I spent 15 hours on a truck serving food.
Oh wow.
So you can imagine, I was exhausted.
I can imagine.
I get home, I get to where we were staying, and I'm like, it was a beautiful place, but we didn't enjoy the place. Why?
You're exhausted.
Because you wanted to sleep.
Yeah.
So the moral of the story here is, these people were calling me, who were calling my lead, oh, bring him back in here because he does his job.
Mm-hmm.
After they were complaining about me and figuring out what I was trying to do.
Mm.
I say this story because I say that people don't understand how we do things and what we do.
Right.
That's my whole thing. I don't. I'm a person that's. I don't complain.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't
You do it.
I didn't like the 15 hours on that truck.
Mm-hmm.
But why did I? Because I volunteered to do it.
Right.
It's my job, and I don't like what you did. Put me. The Red Cross told me to do. Told us to do 15 on the nerve. I didn't like that. But what did I have to do? That's not the public's fault. That's not the public's fault.
Right.
That's my organization's fault that did that. So
well, you had
right?
I just gonna say you have a lot of interesting stories about your life and how you managed to deal with some of the trials and tribulations that you have to
Why
deal
do
with
you
all the
think?
time.
Why do you think I started? Why do you think I started this podcast?
Yeah.
And you remember the intro there? What it says?
Yep.
And
so, how many listeners do you have? Do you know? Is there any way to tell?
yeah, I can. It's funny. It depends on what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I do a solo, it's less than a guest.
Mm.
They like those. They like these things.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask you, would you mind if I run an episode thanking you and put an episode up before this one comes out?
Whatever you want to do, it's fine.
Oh, I will give you. I say it. When I put this episode up on Messenger itself, I'm gonna send you a link to it.
Okay.
So if you want to promote your, if you do like you told me you do meet and greets and those things.
Yeah.
If you want to promote that and give that link, you can do that.
Okay, I will do that.
It's because it's a Spotify link that they come up with, and people just click on it, right? You send it to wherever, and then they click on it.
Okay.
Like I'll send you that link, and then you just open it, and you hear the episode.
Okay. Perfect. Okay.
Let me ask you: do you ever come to Florida?
I haven't for a long time. My in-laws used to live there, but now they're both passed on, so we don't go to Florida.
No, but I mean, you've never done it for a book or anything, for the book tours or anything?
Not for the book.
That would be something interesting,
Oh, well, if I get an invitation, you never know, I might just show up.
Yeah, because because I'm very interested in seeing if ever it happens, I'm interested in seeing what is like.
Oh, you mean for blind people, what it's like?
No.
I can only tell you.
No, what I'm saying is when you do your book stuff.
Yeah.
Your signings and all that stuff. That would be an interesting topic.
Oh, okay.
Because as you can see here, I am capable of taking this recorder anywhere.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a hand holder. All right, I'm gonna throw my outro out here, and then if you want to ask me questions afterwards, you're welcome to it.
Okay. Well, it's
Thank you for listening to my episodes. My episodes will come out Monday and Wednesday. You can listen to me on Apple Podcast, right, Spotify, and many others, including iHeartRadio. Right. The reason I've done this podcast is to give people a voice. Because I think that the disabled community is missing a voice. But I am in a unique position of being able to afford minimal equipment to do this. I'm going to give you my email address. My email, if you want to contact me, is ke4key@gmail.com. And I will also, you can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, at The Disabled Guy, and a few other places where I put my episodes out on Facebook too. With that, thank you for listening. Okay, we're done. Okay, I'm gonna kill this guy.